Hey there, welcome back. So we are here at the AME conference in Jacksonville, Florida, and we've got a few folks lined up today. We're going to do some interviews, and many of you will recognize our first guest, Miss Karen Martin.
Hello, nice to be back with you. Thank
right.
you.
So, how's the conference been going for you?
This is the best conference.
Isn't it?
It really is. The people are great. The level of knowledge is the highest I've ever seen. I think you've said that as well, right?
Yep.
The questions are better than they've ever been,
Yep.
and it's just a really wonderful conference.
Yeah, so it's not a sales pitch for AME, but you really, if you are serious about lean and you're capable of doing it, you really need to try it. The next one is in Cincinnati.
Right.
Right.
And it's not just for manufacturing. It's actually, there's a lot of different industries here. So don't let the name Association for Manufacturing Excellence scare you. It's really a wonderful lean conference.
Yeah, exactly. All right. So Karen, you know, you've been on several times now. We've talked about your book, Value Stream Mapping, right here with our good friend Mike Osterling, who we're going to talk to you later on today. So
my partner in crime.
Yeah, so we spent a lot of time talking about your book. Highly recommend the book if you've not read it. But what we're going to talk about today is something you and I have been kind of talking about on the side, and it's about, you know, many times one of your specialties with your consulting practice is to bring teams together, you know, vice presidents all the way, you know, throughout the organization to really come together and transform, you know, businesses. I guess is the best way to to say it. You know,
I'll take you on the road with me.
Yeah, but something that you said in one of our conversations that really kind of moved me was you talked about how doing this oftentimes can have almost a healing effect. And I thought, healing? What's a healing got to do with lean? This is lean, man. What healing? You know, it's lean.
What's love got to do with it?
Yeah, what's love got to do with it? You know. So I want to explore that today, and I want to talk about what you mean by that, and you know, and then how we as lean practitioners could possibly do this ourselves as we're facilitating change within our organization. So let's just start with what's up with that? What's going on with this healing?
Yeah, crazy healing thing. Well, so first of all, let's go back to Deming. Deming was one of the first people that I ever read that talked about how any kind of organizational performance problems are almost always linked to systems and processes, not people. And that was the foundation of the don't blame people, you know, part of Deming's belief system. And when you look at organizations after 20 blah, blah, blah years of doing this, indeed, every time we see any kind of tension, interpersonal or interdepartmental tension, it is almost always related to systems and processes that aren't working well, even though the people believe it's about people and personality. So when you work with cross-functional teams and you get them especially into a sequestered environment where they can have the depth of time and the ability to focus for an extended period of time on one problem or multiple problems that are, you know, smaller to solve, they're able to surface these process and systems problems that are leading to this tension. And what we find is it almost always melts away because there's now this fundamental understanding about what needs really are. And they're able to fix the processes and the system so that it can provide for that. And so the tension melts away. And I've rarely seen it come back. Rarely.
So you talked about before we came on with the cameras that there was different types of healing. And the first one you talked about was leadership, at the leadership level.
Right.
So
so what a lot of people don't understand until you really start working heavy at the VP and above level, C level, is that there's very often disagreement and lack of alignment across the leadership team. And when you think about, you know, the effects of that, it just trickles down and creates all kinds of muck everywhere. And so until or if you get leaders to agree to come into a room in a sequestered environment and work through, so value stream mapping is a macro level view of how work flows or doesn't flow in an organization. Until you get them in that sequestered environment, having these tough conversations about, well, why do we do that? And why is that department mad at that department for not, you know, providing whatever they need and all of those things. And then you get leaders to agree on, yes, this should be the flow of work at a very, very high level. The people that are trying to implement tactical improvements are always going to run up against obstacles, you know, because there's not that fundamental smooth designed at the top.
Yeah.
And a lot of folks I believe, are misusing value stream mapping at too low a level with the premise that, well, we want to engage the frontline workers. Well, of course you do. But value stream mapping, we believe, is much more of a strategic approach. And so the leaders heal their own relationships at the top level, and oftentimes are able to just, the organization is able to just soar because now leaders understand what was really going on. It wasn't about, them not liking each other.
What about like, what if there's, I don't know, dysfunction, for lack of a better word, between leadership and the front line? Is there, what kind of healing can happen there?
Yes, so what we do that I have found very effective is that there's this baton pass, basically. So at the high level, leaders are deciding and they're creating that strategic what are we going to do? How are we going to operate at a macro level? And then they pass the baton to the middle managers and front lines to determine how. So it's what and how, strategy and tactics. And by having the level of clarity that they get at the upper level, then it makes it so much easier for the front lines to then just go and do their thing. They're the experts, they're the ones doing the work, and they can do, they can make incredible improvement because there's alignment at the top.
Well, even like stealing from Simon Sinek, the leaders also probably identifying why as well,
why
right?
is a good question. He's the master of the why question. It is the question. Why not? And what if?
Yeah, and by the way, Simon Sinek's a closing keynote.
Yes,
here at
I'm
AME,
so excited.
I can't wait.
I'm going to be rushing to my plane, but I'm staying until the last word.
All right, so what about frontline healing then? Between the organization or within the organization?
Interesting that psychology-wise, the same thing exists. At the front lines, you'll have departments and supervisors of departments that may, there's just tension. And I'll even hear from people when we're putting teams together, oh, you don't want Betty and Joe on that same team. They don't get along and it's going to be awful and you're going to have a terrible time facilitating and blah, blah, blah. Every time they say that, I say, I absolutely want Betty and Joe. Did I say Betty and Joe? Betty and Joe need to be on this team, because once you get them mapping the process and looking at what the supplier-customer relationships are all the way down the process, and once the customer's needs are truly identified, oftentimes the supplier can very easily meet those needs. They just never have talked about it and had a forum and a venue, to do that. And so again, at the frontline levels, this tension melts away, and it's so much easier to work, and collaborate.
So how do you do it? What's the facilitation skills? I mean, I'm guessing not anyone can do this.
Right.
It probably takes a skill set and maybe a level of leadership and credibility within the organization, I'm guessing. Yeah,
so it depends on which level you're at. At the leadership level, certainly the facilitator has to be someone who's experienced with and comfortable in seeing leaders have spirited conversation. So I work with facilitators in training all the time, and very often they'll say, oh my God, I had no idea that they don't get along. I go, no, it's not that they don't get along. That's normal. Behind closed doors, and especially when you get into a boardroom situation, behind closed doors there is, and there should always be, spirited conversation, healthy debate about direction and vision and all that stuff. So they have to be someone who's able to mediate that and to call leaders out if they're violating the rules of engagement that we usually set, and those kinds of things, which sometimes a facilitator that's too low in the organization won't have that credibility, and they won't have the
courage,
bravery, to really do it, for fear that they're going to lose their job. And so the leaders need to recognize that is the role of the facilitator. And so it is tougher, not impossible, but tougher for internal people to pull off those leadership level sequestered teams. Front lines, a little easier, especially if you have a facilitator that's manager level or slightly above there, then they already have the hierarchy credibility. If hierarchy credibility really matters, but in many organizations it does. And so they already have that, and then it's just a matter of being a good mediator, a great listener, a great observer of body language, what's not being said, those kinds of things, drawing people out, making people, creating that safe environment so people can say, I disagree and this is why. Those kinds of things really help create the environment for all that tension to surface so that you can deal with it. It's nice.
Fantastic. So what's next for Karen Martin?
You know, I'm actually just very busy with now pulling all 4 books together and working with clients globally now, and all levels.
List off your books again in case not everyone's watched the previous videos.
Thank you. So the Kaizen Event Planner, Mike Osterling and I co-wrote that, the first one, and then Metrics-Based Process Mapping, which is the process level version of mapping. And then my solo book was The Outstanding Organization, and now Value Stream Mapping, Mike Osterling and I co-wrote that as well.
Yeah.
And so all 4 books
So who does all the work, you or Mike? That's one of them.
It's pretty even. It's pretty.
I'm going to ask Mike. I'm going to say, hey, Karen said that she kind of did most of the heavy lifting.
Yeah, no. It's pretty even. And you know, writing a book can be a fairly painful process.
Yeah.
It's lovely when it's done, but it's it's a lot of hard work.
Well, you guys do great work.
Thank you.
Obviously, you got your system worked out. So.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
Yeah. All right, Karen.
It's great to see you as always.
All right.
Enjoy the conference.
Thanks, you too.